Hello everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations, and you're with Simon today. And so we're going to be looking at a 2-week astrology forecast in this video, and we're going to be looking at this most recent new moon that happened in Taurus, and we're also going to look at what type of energy configuration is taking place for us over the next couple of weeks, like I said. So lots of fun stuff to share. And one of the things I definitely want to do in this video is see how I can jam pack the totality of what is going to be occurring in this this next 2 weeks in a very short and concise way. So let's see if I can achieve this thing today. Before I jump into that, I also wanted to share with everybody that currently Raising Vibrations is doing some workshops. I want to be sharing with you that there's an upcoming Pluto transformational workshop that I'm really excited to do. So keep on the lookout for that. I've got loads of Saturn material that I'm busy channeling at the moment and grounding into MP3 and video format so that you can really access what it means to understand Saturn in your chart. And some other stuff like Pluto in the generations. I know that a lot of you that watch these videos want to really understand the context of what it means to be born in your generation. And so that series is also going to come out, and I'm just really on fire creatively at the moment. And so as soon as I have managed to ground the many things that are currently going on for me, I'm going to be releasing it to everybody. So that's what I wanted to share with you. And if you're looking to learn astrology as well, I've got an upcoming course. Don't know the exact date off my memory at the moment, but if you have a look in the description below, you'll see that there's a link to go and sign up for that or inquire about it. All right. Okay. So firstly, I want to adjust our screen here so that we're actually looking at the 15th of May, which is when we had this new moon. And what an amazing event to take place for us, right? The new moon that happens in Taurus and Uranus, this huge outer planet that invigorates change and allows us to accelerate our sense of what it means to be human through awakening our consciousness, goes into the sign of Taurus as well. So the 15th of May was a really special moment for a lot of the astrology community. For me personally, I definitely kind of sit on the side, being a little bit more quiet and observing stuff. Although I do have an article as well as some Taurus material that I will be sharing with everybody in upcoming. And so that's my kind of little contribution to what I think Uranus and Taurus is going to be about. And obviously to you, the community that watches these videos. So a lot of activity taking place regarding Taurus energy. And so it's a pretty natural for us to, spend our time looking at what Taurus means. And in a very sort of simple yet very profound way, when we look at Taurus, we are looking at the archetype within nature as what defines our essential needs, okay? What is this energy that allows sustainability to exist? Okay, so what do I mean about sustainability? I mean that if you go out and you just observe any plant or any animal or any insect and you observe its ecosystem, right? Notice that within this ecosystem, there is something that's supporting the existence of the human being, the animal, the tree, the flower, and that process of what is sustaining in the ecosystem and what is essential to whatever it is that we're observing, that's Taurus, okay? In nature, it is that capacity for us to recognize survival. What is our survival needs? So you would find it really interesting if you took a sort of lion from the Kalahari or from deep, dark Africa and stick it in the middle of the Antarctica, right? The ecosystem will not be able to support the needs of the animal. And so part of that process is saying, this is where you can't sustain, you can't survive, and so therefore you're going to die. And the polarity point of the polarity point of Taurus is Scorpio. So what we're looking at here is this interesting axis of sustainability and what we are merged with, right? Scorpio reflecting the archetype of merging with something. And when we're merged with or osmosed with something, it is feeding our process of life and death. So contemplate the nature of what is in your environment at the moment that is either draining you of life or supporting you with life, right? What is nourishing you? And it's essential to recognize this within the context of your life, because as human beings, we tend to be detached from our organism, our sense of organism, the body, and we don't observe that part of our life, or in fact our life, the life, is a living organism which is growing into something, right? That's why Saturn, at its most intimate and deepest and most natural level, is the path that we are growing into, and Uranus is the energy that awakens that path within inside of us. So how do we sustain that path? How does that unique individuation become sustainable for us? Well, that's Taurus. And then how do we merge with that environment becomes Scorpio. So let's have a look at the astrology chart. South Node in Aquarius, tons of stuff in Taurus, Jupiter in Scorpio. And you can see the opposition between the moon and the sun in opposition to Jupiter there, right? And that's in Scorpio, Taurus. And then not necessarily, but if you have a look, the south node of the moon sits in Aquarius there, and it squares Mercury. So what's really interesting about this is, how is your environment and you communicating with each other? What is in your environment that is either stimulating, like I said, the growth process for you, or like taking energy away from you? These are interesting things to contemplate as we understand the essence of this new moon and how it's setting the tone for when we go into the full moon, which is happening on the 29th of May at, if I'm not mistaken, 7 or 9 degrees Sagittarius. So what we are dealing with here is our relationship as a core archetype to our essential needs. Okay, and you can see the astrology there, the uniqueness, South Node in Aquarius, Scorpio, the osmosis and the merging with, right? We're all merged with something. So the core of this, right? But now what is transforming for us? What is essentially, what is the story that's been trying to come through with this energy? And when we look at the transition of Mercury and Uranus making a contact together, you can begin to see a sort of story unfolding, because Uranus and Mercury being close together are making a square to the Mars and to the Pluto. So Mars 29 degrees Capricorn, Uranus 29 degrees Aries. I mean, you can't even make this stuff up, right? So there is a 29-degree mark, and they're in the constellations Capricorn and Aries. And Capricorn is all about solidifying something, whereas Aries is all about exploring without solidification. So how do you take an energy that is Uranus, saying complete freedom to know thyself, and Mars at 29 degrees Capricorn saying, well, part of my initiation is to structure, right? So Mars energy saying structure in Capricorn, Uranus in Aries saying freedom to individuate. Yet the ruling planet of Uranus is Mars on this new moon. And this is kind of like, but hold on, we have this energy of individuation and then this energy of defining stuff. Why is this happening? Why are we defining stuff and wanting to find freedom at the same time? And so we begin to see the symphony of trines that are taking place between Saturn and the new moon, which is the moon over here in Taurus and Saturn over there, right? The trines. And even if you have a look at, I mean, essentially Uranus is trining the Saturn over there. It's more of Pluto and Mars that are trining the sun and moon. And those trines between the earth signs, so you see Capricorn and Mars in Capricorn, and the moon and sun in Taurus. So a solidification of the values while we redefine them. Bonkers, in my opinion, because it's like contradicting things. It's like, let's define stuff and solidify it, and yet at the same time, let's radically innovate. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about here. We're talking about radical innovation, regarding the way that you inwardly structure your sense of self, right? And for me, I've gone through some really, really profound, beautiful, and yet subtle awakenings with this energy, not only in my own personal life, but how that's resonated outwardly into the space, into the environment that is essentially sustaining this organism that I call me, right? And then the ecosystem that is the family. So you can see that there is this beautiful energy that is working together, weaving us into a state of sustainability and defining what is sustainable, while at the same time not creating or being limited within that capacity, opening up space. So I invite everybody, when you've got a chance to go and read the article that is posted on Raising Vibrations' website, and I'll post a link in the description as well as the comments to that article. And the article is entitled The Recreation of Yourself. And the last 7 years with Uranus transiting through Aries has been an opening for us to decondition from a paradigm of belief and truth and behavior patterns that have been once linked with the past. And so as we enter this Uranus and Taurus energy, we enter into the solidification and the grounding and the establishment of the sense of self that you have given yourself permission to be. Given yourself permission to be. And then Uranus and Taurus says, now let's add the real estate to that. Let's add the quality. Let's add the sustainability. Let's add the essential allowance for what is going to nourish and nurture the context of the self that you have given permission to be, right? So some really profound things to think about when we look at this, the context of this astrology chart. So let's go have a look at one more other thing that I did want to look at, and that is the Venus energy over here, which is sitting at 25 degrees, again, 25 degrees Gemini, and leading up until this point. So if I go back in time, right, we go to the 14th, we can see that, where is the square going to happen? Come on, square, there we go, right. Neptune, 16 degrees, square, Venus and Gemini, all right, and you see that square there? Now, what's interesting to note is that the ruler of Venus is Mercury, and Mercury is conjunct Uranus at the same time that Venus is squaring Neptune. Now, we've got inner planets, Venus, and Mercury contacting outer planets. Now, when we deal with outer planets, we're dealing with what? We're dealing with the transformation of collective and individual psychic understanding of life. In other words, what is occurring at a deeper multidimensional level, and how are we perceiving that inwardly? So when you see Mercury and Venus in a contact with these outer planets, it has to do with the way that we intellectualize, Mercury, our sense of values, Venus, and then Uranus and Neptune are saying, let's dissolve and liberate from the past so that we can then create space to step into where we are free to value what is inspirational for us, right? And so for me, I've just decided, like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create loads of space around me. And the thing that I'm inspired about is to create loads of content for you to digest that empowers you. That's my values, right? I love doing it. And so what materializes is a whole entire series on Pluto in Leo generation, right? An hour MP3 and the Pluto and Virgos, and all of that's for you to digest so that when you go out into the world, you go, I can be and understand myself. I can help process why things have been happening for me, right? Because we are ultimately here to process Uranus conjunct Mercury, our story, right? So that's this whole entire connection of Gemini. And the key in this essence is, what space am I giving myself to step into, right? What space am I allowing myself to be, to hold, that allows me to be this, that I am, this organism, right? Okay, so let's fast forward to some key events, and I wrote down some information over here. So let's move over to what is happening. Let's have a look. Okay, so on the Mars goes into Aquarius. So I wrote it down over here, right? Mars is now at 0 degrees Aquarius, and this is happening on the 18th of May, which is one day after this, or before this video. Today is the 17th of May, 2018. And here we have Mars now moving into Aquarius. So we have this full moon, or this new moon, that take place, and we contain this energy, or we birth this energy into what does space mean for us. and how do we fill it with something that's sustainable. And Uranus, now in Taurus, is activated by Mars moving into Aquarius, and Aquarius is saying, let's begin to now really radically reshape and allow individuation to be part of this process, okay? This is now the 18th of May, which is tomorrow, okay? And you can see here really, really strongly that the moon and, well, just the moon in this particular instance is making an inconjunct to Mars and the South Node. So Mars in the South Node says individuation, liberate, and the moon in Cancer on this day says from what? From habits, from a self-identity that has once symbolized what you've been doing, and now to create space to allow a new sense of self to develop and be cultivated in this area. Yeah? And of course, it has to do a lot with the fact that now the planet that is actually being transformed through Uranus is no longer Mars, right? It's Venus. So immediately Venus is the focus point in your chart, guys, not Mars anymore. Even though Mars is playing a role, obviously it's the leading edge of our evolution, but Venus is now being under under the spell of Uranus that is saying, right, this is not working, let's move this out, let's get this out over here, yeah? Okay, so let's go ahead and have a look at some other aspects. So the moon on the 19th will then move into this water trine. Now notice this water trine that's taking place. It's the moon, so it's not going to be really that transformational in that moment. It will become later on when the moon actually conjuncts Jupiter. So right now we have this water trine that takes place. Not only is it in the signs of water energy, it is contacting a Neptune energy with the moon. So there's a double emphasis of water. And what do we do when we understand the water trine, right? The water trine is the way that we evolve in this life that has to do with direct experience, that has to do with the experiment, the experimental way. So we can intellectualize stuff, we can understand stuff, but do we see it? Are we unified with the experience that has happened to us? So what does Uranus in Taurus mean for you versus mean for me? What does the experience of something feel like versus what it is for you? And when we begin to tune into that process, and by the way, for any of you that are unsure about what the water trine is about, there's two really, really good videos that I created on the internet that's called Water Trine Part 1 and Part 2, and they're really in depth, lots of rich content for you to digest there, and I'll also post that in the description for you as well to watch. And I highly encourage to check that out, because we're going to be going through a water trine energy later on in this month. So something's being transformed, something's being dissolved in order for something new to exist. And for most of the time when we sustain ourselves, we sustain through water, right? And water doesn't necessarily have to mean H2O, it can mean what you get from fruit, especially in the human condition. Okay. So we have this water trine take place, and it's obviously going to shift something into a subtle change that is really rooted in Uranus, right? Shifting into Taurus. So then we have this the 20th of May, and we see the moon and the sun. The moon and the North Node conjunct each other, and it forms an opposition to the South Node of Mars. And we also have the moon then squaring Mercury at 11 degrees Taurus, as well as Mars squaring this. So this is a day for a lot of explosiveness, okay? So kind of just like if you're going to get into an argument, this is a day that's going to happen, and allow yourself to recognize that on some level, this is going to be about how you're being seen or not being seen. And so I encourage you to just allow yourself to notice how you might be less objective in what you are feeling. And so just recognize that part of what you're experiencing is what the other person's experiencing. So if you do find yourself in a conflict, the resolution, in my opinion, is how does each person's needs not being met in the conversation, and how you can meet those needs, right? So one person might feel like their need for security wasn't met, and the other person's need for to have space to go and explore something wasn't met. This is a type of energy that could really stimulate that essential, this is frustrating. And so how can we kind of create a relationship with each other where, this separation that might occur during this square is simply just because our needs are trying to be met and we're bumping into things, okay? So check out for the 20th. And that's pretty much what that trine, sorry, not that trine, that square is trying to teach us with Aquarius and Taurus and Leo. It's how do we validate our needs and how do we interact with our environment in which those needs can be met in that sense. All right, so let's have a look. Mars also inconjuncts Venus, which I wrote over there. And this is an interesting thing because when we have Venus and Mars in an inconjunct with each other, it's going to add to this kind of like, oh, I can't see where you're coming from. I can't see my needs where I'm coming from. So this is a day where I highly encourage you to recognize a lot of growth is going to take place, but there could be a lot of mishappenings and we're not seeing each other and there's a lot of conflict or frustration. All right. Just, you know, kind of like, okay, this is what's occurring. Let the energy pass. It's pretty much just for 2 days and then everything will kind of get back to a more normal way of being. But we want to embrace this energy because it's really going to show us something about how our needs are, how they can be fulfilled in that sense. And of course, the whole point here is the 29-degree Taurus archetype, right? 29 degrees of Taurus. So what are we learning in the Taurus archetype that Mars and Venus is trying to show us with this inconjunct that's taking place? Okay. So let's go ahead. I mean, there's some more energy that's taking place 21st as well. You can see the tension with the moon again to Jupiter, Mercury opposed Jupiter as well. And so there's this kind of confusion around needs of my own, communicating them, and then the needs of other people. And how do we just, you know, connect with each other? How do we bond? How are we like emerging with our ecosystem? Because a lot of the time we just think our ecosystem is ours and everybody's got to obey to it, but other people are interacting with it as well. So how did the ants support this part of the ecosystem? While how do the birds support that part of the ecosystem? And how does the tree interact and bond with the ecosystem? And when we look at the whole, we see that everybody has a part to play. Mars and Aquarius, South Node and Aquarius, right? So how is everybody's definition fitting into the context of what does this an ecosystem do, and how does it support or not support whatever the growth cycle is about, right? How does individuation exist within this growth, within this ecosystem? So we're dealing with the inconjuncts here, okay? And so again, when I talk about the inconjuncts, I'm talking about an angle in which we're probably not going to see something. So between individuation and our immediate environment with Mars and Venus is what's going to happen. So we're learning how to recognize how we are having space or where there isn't any space. And so we might just find a little bit of tension around trying to create that for ourselves on the 20th and 21st of May, okay? So we'll go a bit ahead and we'll see that the moon makes a trine with all the earth signs, and that's Saturn in Capricorn, you know, Uranus in Taurus and moon in Virgo. And when you learn about the water energy, the feminine principle is water trine, Scorpio, Pisces, Cancer, the sense of identity and how we're emotionally evolving through this. And then the container that it exists within, Earth, right? So the definition and how that definition is either supporting or not supporting the sustainability of your existence. So both of these two things are going to be playing out over here. What's the container for your essence to exist within is the key word with this transit. And then we go over to the 23rd of May and we have Saturn in opposition to Venus. And so this is going to be a time in which when you look at the context of Saturn, it is structure, it is definition, it is the boundaries, and it either supports or it doesn't support whatever it is that you want to do with your life. What is your growth path? So when we look at the Cancer archetype, we're dealing with the process of understanding our inner emotional reality as it shapes the sense of direction we're trying to work with. So is your identity in alignment with the direction? And so with Venus now in Cancer, it's allowing us to align with what are the values that sustains our growth process. How are we nourishing that? So you take care of yourself during this period of time, right? Do you allow yourself enough sleep so that you can then wake up the next morning feeling refreshed to continue the discipline work that is required with Saturn? So this is this process. So for me, I have tremendous amount of excitement. Like I have so much excitement around creating all of this content, yet I've got to observe that if I do it too fast, I could burn out. You know, this is an example. So we're looking at how to ground things in a sustainable way, right? So the analogy can be used as like if we've got a plant, and if you water the plant too much, it just drowns. Or if you don't water the plant, it dries. So you've got to find this balance between what is nourishing to you And so you're not applying too much water to it, or you're not applying, or you're completely neglecting it or feeling it. So you're learning about neglect or overprotection is the keys, you know, with regards to nourishing your garden, because this is what we're doing. We're cultivating our garden, right? We've gone through the process of planting the seeds. Now we've got to nourish it, and it's in a sustainable way. And so patience is the key. Okay, so let's have a look. We've got that. Now you've got this. It's like, look at this interesting stuff, right? There's the moon in Libra making a trine to the Uranus there, or Aquarius there. And then now the moon, the sun's in Gemini, and it makes an air trine, right? The air trine. This, how are we communicating this sustainable process? How are we thinking about this? It's such a beautiful way in which this month is about cultivating and getting into a place of like, here's my garden, I've planted my seeds, and now how do I watch it grow? And you speak to any Taurus person, they're like, patience is key. Right? So here we sit, and we've got a lot of people that are manifesting generators in their human design, or you're a manifester, or, you know, you've got a lot of impatience in your chart, you've got a lot of Aries. And the lesson is cultivate your garden slowly, cultivate it in ways, observe where it needs attention and where it has too much attention, learn this beautiful balance. And everybody's going like, I just want to get it done. I just want to get it done. And it's the slowing down process that is occurring for us right now. Okay. So then we go over to the moon conjuncting Jupiter, which then trines Neptune in Pisces, and the Sol trine then makes a connection to the 9-degree Venus there. And this is, I think, a really radical thing. I think at this point, we're going to get it. We're going to get the shift within our truth. And I think up until this point, it's going to be sort of like, oh my God, we're on a boat. We're trying to, you know, control the waves. And when this trine happens for us, there's going to be a dimension of shifting within us. We're going to get it. We're going to recognize, the way that we've got to change our truth here, this cultivation, has got to come through the laws that we're now stepping into, which is cultivation, which is nourishment, which is sustainability, versus more of the energy of Taurus, which was Aries, which was go out there and pioneer new waves of change and awaken everybody. And, you know, this is my purpose and my meaning, etc. You see? So shifting that attention into a slower vibration and awakening subtly into the body, right? Awakening subtly into the body. Oh, I love that so much. Okay. And then, of course, we'll move over to the new moon that will take place, the opposition that will take place over there. And this is on the 29th. I think the moon moves into 8 degrees Gemini, right? So the sun's in 8 degrees Gemini, and the moon is at 8 degrees Sagittarius, and we'll have this full moon take place. And at that point, I'll be on the line, and I'll talk to you around what that means. So that's what I have to share with everybody today. I hope that you got a lot out of it. Rewatch the video, because there's a lot of information that's gone really fast and sustainable in that sense. I hope it was sustaining. Look at all this energy that's taking place here. Truly, truly profound. Lots and lots of cool stuff happening. And it's all pointing to Saturn, reshaping, redefining. So contemplate how we're reshaping ourselves right now. So yes, don't forget, in the description and the comments below is stuff for you to go and digest and read. If you don't know about our Patreon, please go and check that out right now. In the description, and link is also a way to get to that. Up next is probably the subscriber chart reading for Patreon as well. And thank you so much, everybody, for your time and attention. I love you all. Have a wonderful week. Take care. Bye-bye.